Let's talk about LA Knight. LA Knight was a participant in that U.S. title invitational on Friday. And he lost. Again. After coming up a loser at Money in the Bank. After Money in the Bank at the post-show press conference, somebody asked Triple H about LA Knight. And Triple H said, "Good things come to those who wait." I was waiting to see if he would get a spot on the WrestleMania card this year, because that's around the time that he really started catching fire with the crowds. They had 2 nights of WrestleMania. He was left off the show. The crowds have only grown louder since then. Triple H himself was drowned out at the Night of Champions press conference in Saudi Arabia by chants of LA Knight. And the man wasn't even on the show. Now, he did finally make it onto the show at Money in the Bank. He came within fingertips of winning until Damian Priest threw him off the ladder. And I didn't mind Damian Priest winning Money in the Bank. If it wasn't going to be LA Knight, I was happy that it was Damian Priest, because storyline-wise, it made sense for him to win that match. But all of this, to me, as I look back on this now, all of this has felt like one big dress rehearsal. This has all felt like one big test. Like they're asking the question, is this real? Is this groundswell of fan support a real thing? Is this guy the real deal, or is he, just a fly-by-night attraction that the fans are going to move on from? It's been over 4 months, and they're still chanting his name and doing his catchphrases and bringing signs to the events. The rumor on Friday was that WWE is seriously considering having a Latino champion in the company. Santos Escobar would fit that bill. And Escobar against Rey Mysterio this week, I'm sure it's going to be very good. But the other rumor was that the push for LA Knight would begin after SummerSlam. Which still means that you're leaving the man off one of your biggest shows of the year. Again, for the second time this year. It's also very likely the U.S. title match is going to get left off SummerSlam anyway, whether he was in the match or not. But I would hope they give him a cameo on the show so he can at least get an entrance and show his face, because you're going to have 45,000 people chanting this man's name. Someone on the stream on Friday even suggested the idea of an open challenge for the U.S., because we don't have enough of those. An open challenge for the U.S. title and having LA Knight win the championship there at SummerSlam that way. I don't know why Theory would issue an open challenge, but if he beats Escobar, let's assume Escobar is going to beat Rey this Friday, which he should. If he then goes on and beats Escobar, let's say the night before SummerSlam, could be as simple as Theory coming out at SummerSlam, very upset that they left the U.S. champion off one of the biggest shows of the year. And maybe he throws out a challenge to anybody in the back. The crowd starts chanting his name, out comes LA Knight, and they lose their minds when he wins the title. They have a short match and he wins. Sure, yeah, you could do that. The U.S. title is doing nothing for Austin Theory, and Austin Theory is doing nothing but dragging down the U.S. title. Ever since WrestleMania. And having him go out there like he did last week on commentary or in any of his promos and remind us that I beat John Cena at WrestleMania, I got news for you. That's not the flex they think it is. Or that it should have been. And I don't blame Austin Theory for that so much as I blame the way they've booked him since WrestleMania. But let's leave the fantasy booking on the side for now. I know people think that this guy is buried because he lost on Friday. LA Knight is not buried. I said this weeks ago. LA Knight is not buried just because he was left off the Madison Square Garden show a few weeks ago. And just because he lost on Friday does not mean that LA Knight is buried. There are actually some positive signs that this rumored post-SummerSlam push could be a real thing. Right? They've only recently pushed out new merch for the guy, which appears to be selling very well. Apparently, he's one of the top merch sellers in the company. That's a positive sign. They're clearly planting the yeah signs. They have these signs that say yeah on them. Clearly, they're planting signs in the crowd at these shows. And I don't doubt that people are bringing their own as well. But there are signs that they are clearly planting in the crowd, especially in those first front row sections. You can't tell me those signs we see in the floor sections aren't planted there by the company. That's a positive sign. He was the only man in the four-way on Friday to be given promo time when he came out for the match. That's a positive sign. He said SummerSlam is right around the corner and it's the biggest party of the summer, and the party that I want to go to is the one where I capture the United States Championship. These are all good things that they're doing. But he can cut all the great promos in the world. At some point, if he doesn't start backing it up and winning, he just becomes another Bray Wyatt, who used to talk big talk and then he would go out and lose all of his big matches. At some point, people start to see through that. And this lightning in a bottle that you've captured with this guy is going to wither away. Which brings me to this latest report from Wade Keller of the Pro Wrestling Torch. I want to read this to you. I'll break it down by section. I'll comment as I go along. This was posted yesterday. LA Knight, despite not winning the Fatal 4-Way match on SmackDown, is in for a big push later this summer and fall. PWTorch sources indicate Vince McMahon has grown to be a fan of his, and Paul Levesque already was. So let's stop there. We knew Triple H was a fan of his already because Triple H is the one who brought him into NXT. And Triple H is the one, when Vince McMahon took his vacation from WWE last year so that he could plot his return to WWE, Triple H is the one who dropped the Max Dupree garbage and gave him his old name back. He should have been LA Knight on the main roster from day one. He's the one who gave him his name and his character back. The fact that Vince McMahon now is a fan of his, it only reinforces the point that it was a huge mistake that he made, and it's nice to hear that he realizes it was a mistake. So the report continues. Knight has a long-running reputation for rubbing people the wrong way behind the scenes and just being, quote, bad at backstage politics. Those who know him well tend to like him, and some of them have spoken up on his behalf when Knight gives a bad first impression. Knight's surging crowd reactions and social media popularity have landed him on the radar of Levesque and McMahon as being a candidate for a big push after SummerSlam, PWTorch sources indicate. So this backs up the other report from Friday that he is in line for a big push after SummerSlam. It says, by all indications, despite his average or below average work in the ring that isn't at the level of most WWE main eventers, he is on course to get a push at a high level in spite of that because he has a special X factor and connection with the crowd that has not gone unnoticed by anyone. Now, people might give Keller grief there for editorializing about the average and below average match stuff, but he's not wrong. LA Knight's strength is not his in-ring work. It's his charisma, it's his verbal skills. Point me to a top 5 list or a top 10 list of great LA Knight or great Eli Drake matches. There is none. I'm sure he had some good matches in Impact as Eli Drake. I mean, he was there long enough. I can't name any offhand, but I'm sure he had a few good ones. In NXT, I like the stuff he did with Cameron Grimes over the $1 Million belt. But that's it. You know, he was part of the NXT War Games match between Team Black and Gold and Team 2.0, but he was one of 8 people in that match. Right? This year's Money in the Bank match I thought was excellent. He was one of 7 people in that match. I'm not counting those. He is a competent worker, but nobody is going to mistake him for Seth Rollins or AJ Styles. And there have been some sloppy moments in some of his recent matches where he looked a little, out of sorts. It's okay to root for the guy to succeed and be a fan of LA Knight, but also acknowledge that he has got some weaknesses. That does not mean that he should not be in line for a big push because he's getting reactions everywhere he goes. And he doesn't have to be the best in-ring worker in the company. He doesn't have to be Seth Rollins. He doesn't have to be Drew McIntyre. He doesn't have to be any of those people. But then there was this last part of the report, and this really irritated me. If his push isn't sustained, even if crowds still like him, it'll likely be because he mishandled himself backstage in a way that caused him to lose the support of key people who can influence his push. So, loosely translated, if his push tapers off, then it must be his fault for pissing off the wrong people. So blame LA Knight. Don't blame creative. Don't blame Triple H. Don't blame Vince McMahon. So let's address the elephant in the room. There have been reports and rumors over the years of him, as they say in the report, rubbing people the wrong way and getting on the bad side of the wrong people. Even as far back as his first stint in NXT. They brought him in, they gave him a new name. Remember? Slate Randall was the name that they gave him when he first got signed to NXT. And I was singing the man's praises even before he ever made his debut on television. He never made a single appearance on NXT television. I was singing the man's praises. So no one was more shocked than I was when I went online and I read that he had gotten released. This is a clip from Sound Off 339 from August of 2014. Danny Jax, who was the lone female release, and Slate Randall, the Hollywood He-Man, the former Shawn Ricker from Championship Wrestling from Hollywood, also the guy who appeared on The Rock's reality show, The Hero. That cut shocked the hell out of me. You may remember, I think at the beginning of the year when I was talking about possible NXT call-ups this year, people to look out for, I believe I mentioned Slate Randall as one of those people. I just can't believe they cut him. Now, he had not yet debuted on TV. Last I heard, he was out with a concussion. You know, he's only 31. He's got a great look. He was the last man Paul Bearer managed before he died last year. I think he saw a lot of potential in him. You can go find videos of the guy on YouTube. Go find videos of his promos back from his Shawn Ricker days. The guy is money. So unless there was some kind of medical issue here that we're not aware of, I think WWE made a big, big mistake. He was only 31 then. That's a lot of time wasted from then to now. So why did they fire him? He told Chris Van Vliet recently that it was made very clear to him at the time that it wasn't a talent issue. It was not a talent issue, it was a professional issue. He said that he and the head coach at the time did not see eye to eye. That had to be Bill DeMott, who got released himself, in fact, the following year. So I assume he's referring to Bill DeMott. But this is what he told the UK Mirror in 2018 about being blacklisted by WWE. He said, I would put a lot of that down to politics, if I was honest with you, and some of it is me shooting myself in the foot here and there. But a lot of it is not being allotted a lot of opportunities for one reason or another. I have voiced frustrations about some of the guys that I know who have been doing it as long as I have. They have already had their run, and they are on the back end of their career, while mine is really just starting now, and I have been there just as long. I started to look at it, and it's like, man, if I had done X, Y, and Z, I'd have already had my run too. But it's a lot of different stuff. When I was on the Indies in 2008, I had an opportunity with WWE when I went in, and I did a dark match, and they liked me and wanted me to come back the next week. And here's the part where I shot myself in the foot. I showed up an hour late on that second day due to some circumstances, and after that, they didn't talk to me for about 3 years. I was put on a blacklist. I didn't even end up getting to WWE into developmental until my 10th year in the business. And again, some of that was me, some of that was politics, but a lot of it was BS. So it's a little frustrating every time I think about it. It kind of bites me in the ass every day, but at the same time, it also is kind of what drives me. So he admits that he is not blameless in this. He probably said and did things that got him heat, which in turn led to him being released. The talk at the time was that the company was very unhappy with some of his social media posts, and that he also sent an email that buried him with management. I don't know exactly who he sent the email to, if it was the head coach, or if it was somebody else. I don't know what the email said. I don't know. But he may have put his foot in his mouth, and that's what did it. But to hear him tell it, it had a lot to do with the head coach at the time. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, as it usually is, right? There's the old Robert Evans quote, there's 3 sides to every story, your side, my side, and the truth. But there was controversy around his exit from Impact Wrestling also. You know, he was very vocal about not wanting to do intergender matches. He was asked to work with Tessa Blanchard at the time that they were pushing Tessa in matches against men. I mean, she even went on to win the Impact World title. If I remember, I think it was from Sami Callihan. But he was very much against it. He was asked to work with her, and maybe he was asked to job to her. He refused. And then there was a tweet in 2019 where somebody asked him about this online, and he said, not to take anything away from her. She's a great performer and athlete, but there is nothing realistic about a 5'3" girl fighting a 6'4" jacked wrestler. Wrestling rooted in some level of realism is what attracts casual audiences, and that is how you grow. And he also tweeted that Killer Cross would destroy Jordynne Grace in a real fight. There was heat on him for going on a podcast and saying the writers had booked him into oblivion. Steve Austin did the same thing once. He buried creative on WWE's own show. And a month later, they booked him to job to Brock Lesnar in a King of the Ring qualifying match on TV. They don't like it when you speak ill of creative. So his exit from Impact was not an amicable one. He does seem, when you put all this together, he does seem like the kind of guy who says what's on his mind. He can't help himself. And maybe he is a little tone deaf when it comes to playing the game, playing the political game. But the idea that, if his push gets derailed in these next few months, well, then it must be LA Knight's fault. Don't blame the company. If he's smart enough not to get in his own way, this could be the big break that he's been waiting over a decade for. But it almost makes it sound like they're setting him up to fail. We'll give the guy just enough rope to hang himself with, and the slightest thing, if he doesn't play ball, if he's not a good little soldier, his push goes away. And then they can turn around and say, see, we tried. We tried to give the people what they wanted. We gave him a chance, and it didn't work. He blew it. I hope that's not the case. For his sake, I hope that's not the case. Whatever the reasons were, they did not take advantage when he was 31. Now he's going to be 41. And this is probably his last chance.